Chariots of Fire. It's a film which I'm sure you've seen. And it's a film which tells the story of the Cambridge-educated athlete, Harold Abrahams, who aspires to win a gold medal in the 1924 Paris Olympics. But the movie also tells the story of Scottish-born Eric Liddell, a devout Christian who saw running as part of his worship of God's glory and who refused to train or compete on the Sabbath. Chariots of Fire. And you'll recall in the movie, in the film, that scene in Paris where Eric Liddell, though reluctant, meets the then king, and where attempts are made to persuade him to run on the Sunday, the day his race was scheduled for, and where, in response, Eric Liddell says these words: God made countries, God makes kings and the rules by which they govern, and those rules say that the Sabbath is his, and I, for one, intend to keep it that way. Even though it would potentially cost him a medal, Eric Liddell was unwilling to deny his faith in Jesus Christ. He stood tall and didn't shrink in the heat of the moment. Shrinking in the heat of the moment when asked if he knew Jesus was, however, what one man did. His name was Peter. And it's Peter's denial of Jesus we want to look at in our reflections this week, under the apt and appropriate theme, as we'll discover, of failure is never final. But before we look at Peter's denial itself, let me invite your consideration around a little bit of the background to Matthew 26. Because there is a progression, or perhaps a regression would be more accurate, or a slippery slope which took Peter downhill in terms of the events leading up to the denial of Jesus, which led to his shrinking and his inability to stand tall and to affirm his faith in Jesus Christ when it counted. And so in our reflections today, we want to think about the fact that Peter was going downhill. Peter was going downhill because he was betrayed by pride. He was the one who boasted, "I'll never deny Jesus. If everybody else denies Jesus, no, you can count on me. I'll never deny Jesus." Well, Peter was to be found out on that one. And in so doing, Peter took the first step in falling away. He was overconfident. He was betrayed by pride. He was also besieged by laziness. As we read Matthew 26, you'll see that he and the other disciples fell asleep at a time when he needed to be watchful. Peter fell asleep. His laziness led to lack of preparation. And you know, so often in the spiritual life, we can gradually drift away, as it were, to sleep spiritually because we're too lazy to get involved and to give ourselves 100% to Jesus. And Peter was besieged by laziness. Let's never allow ourselves to become betrayed by pride like Peter. Let's never allow ourselves to be besieged by laziness like Peter. And let's never allow ourselves to be beset by cowardice as Peter was. He followed Jesus, we read, at a distance. Oh, he still followed Jesus. But now that Jesus was becoming unpopular, now that the heat in the kitchen was getting too hot for Peter, he stays far enough away so as not to be identified with him. Peter was unprepared to face the challenge of ridicule and persecution. Peter was a follower, or was he really a follower? And could we be like Peter at times? Sometimes we can have cowardice in following Jesus. Are we ashamed to be seen carrying a Bible as we walk up the road to church? Are we ashamed to be seen giving thanks for the food in a public restaurant? Can we be cowards? Can we shrink away like Peter did? Peter was beset by cowardice. And Peter, fourthly, was also beleaguered by worldliness. He was influenced by the world, by sitting with the servants of the high priest and warming himself by their fire. He was influenced. He was ashamed to be seen with Jesus. It was easier for Peter and more convenient for Peter to mingle with those of the world and enjoy their comforts. But you know, the challenge from Peter's experience is that we cannot and should not allow ourselves to be, as it were, comforted by the fire of this world. We can't be like Peter. And so the challenge today is for us not to allow ourselves to go, as it were, downhill spiritually. Peter, because of events that he allowed himself to be involved in, started to go downhill. He was betrayed by pride. He was besieged by laziness. He was beset by cowardice. And he was beleaguered by worldliness. These things took Peter on a slippery slope downhill, to the point where Peter was going to deny Jesus. And in our reflections tomorrow, we look at Peter's first denial of Jesus Christ.